Titled Getting Personal, focusing on curriculum built for one. So when we think about the age of technology, it's interesting to note how personalized can we get with our education. With integrated learning becoming smarter in gaming, we just talked about the big data and what we can collect with accelerated intervention, getting smarter than ever before, taking students well into 6th grades of improvement. We have visual and auditory tools at our hands that we never had before. It's interesting to take a look at the role of technology and just how personal and a one-on-one basis we can get with a student's learning path. So today we have a wonderful group of panelists here to share with us some insight on that very topic about getting personal in our curriculum. I know that building curriculum and content is a very hot topic these days, so I know we're all very excited to hear from our wonderful panelists. Our moderator, who will be joining us here, is Masuma Henry, and Masuma is the executive director of the Artefact group. So Masuma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie, and thanks to everyone for being here today. I'm surprised to see that the panels are actually really packed considering all the weather on the East Coast and the Las Vegas lifestyle. As Carrie mentioned, we have a great panel set up for today. We're focusing on personalization. And when we were speaking to all the panelists earlier and discussing the topic of today's session, an interesting theme came out, which is, we've been talking about personalization for a really long time across a bunch of technology verticals like medical and healthcare, consumer electronics, the connected home. However, education is a really different area in that the outcomes that we're focusing on have really big stakes. And like actually the medical industry, having evidence-based outcomes is really important. And so therefore, the types of personalization and technology we need to incorporate, we need to look at them a lot more closely, and we really need to be doing evaluations and impact assessments and utilize our technology the right way. And in the earlier panel that was just now, we talked about asking the right questions. That's really important. So a bunch of our panelists have interesting experiences here, and I want to start off by having them introduce each other, and then we'll get right into questions. So Raj, we can start with you.
Sure. Hey, my name is Raj Valli. I'm founder and CEO of a personalized learning platform technology company. That's a mouthful, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And I'm here. I'm very excited about very engaging conversations. I really have some contrarian opinions about some of the thoughts and topics that have been discussed here earlier, and we'll get a chance to discuss it. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Laster. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for McGraw-Hill Education. And McGraw-Hill Education really is about learning and learning outcomes. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I think we live in an age where we can really weave together curriculum, technology, and pedagogy to really move teaching forward. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk about this.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Yan. I'm the founder and CEO of Rullingnet Corporation, which is changing the name to Vinci Education, as you know, as brand Vinci. So I'm also the creator of Vinci Blended Learning. What we are really serious about is really learning for young children, anywhere from PK to grade 3. And I take that as a personal experience because I have 2 kids right in that age range, 4 and 5. So I'm living that every day. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to discuss how we can individualize the learning for each child.
Great. Well, I want to start with the big question that I think a lot of people are wondering about, which is, how is personalization different today than it was 10 years ago? Raj?
Thanks, Masuma. I actually want to pose a question to the audience. How many of you actually took a flight to come here to attend this conference? It's about 80%. Would any of you, would you have actually climbed into the aircraft if I told you that there was probably a wee bit chance the pilot may not land the plane? No hands went up, right? That's what I thought. Think about when we talk about personalized learning, think about what's happening with our pilots, with our surgeons. Think about anything you have learned in your life. I keep frequently talking about how one learns to drive a car because I think I would probably can take for granted that probably everyone here in this room would have actually learned to drive a car. But it's actually no different than how you learn anything else in life. It's a very personalized learning process. Someone actually shows you how something is done. They'll show you, hey, here's how you hold the wheel, here's how you actually do this, and they'll put you behind the wheel, and they'll actually ask you to drive, at which point they will actually give you feedback. Hey, don't make that left turn, stop here at the stop sign, no, 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 and you've all gone through this before. And then they'll evaluate you to see whether you know actually how to drive or not. This is exactly what happens with bank tellers and every other profession. Unfortunately, in education, if you really think about it, teachers, because of the way we are structured, they essentially will show you how something is done. Here's how you solve an algebra problem. And because they can't watch every kid do the problem, they'll actually give them homework and say, hey, why don't you do these 10 problems and come back? They'll assess the performance on these 10 problems, and then they'll say, okay, they'll either reteach the problem or move on to the next topic. Now think about if I were to teach you to drive a car exactly like this, because I show you how to actually drive a car, and because I cannot watch you because I have 20 other people to watch you at the same time, I kind of apologize and say, give you the keys and say, hey, show up my doorstep. If you do, I kind of sort of know that you know how to drive a car. Makes no sense. And personalized learning is all about actually focusing at the point of learning and figuring out what's really happening at the point of learning. That's what we are about. And what we have done in Tabtor is, what has been a black box, we are actually trying to unravel the black box, and we are trying to put digital eyeballs for every teacher so they can actually understand truly what's happening for a kid when they are actually going through the learning process. That's what we have really done, and that is personalized learning. And I really have a pet peeve about how we actually treat our kids. We spend $810 billion a year in teaching kids, about $7,700 a student a year. That's the highest of any nation. But look at, I do believe in big data, the earlier discussion, but if data is evidence, US ranking in OECD from 2000 to 2013, over the last 4 times, every 3-4 years, we've gone from rank number 24 to rank number 36. We are actually behind Slovenia and Iceland and every other country. There is something fundamentally wrong in the way we are actually teaching kids because we think that the stakes are not high. If we actually raise math scores to the levels of Canadian students, by the way, they're not very high either, 3/4 of a point, we will actually add $77 trillion in 80 years, or actually adding 20% per paycheck per US person here every year, year after year. Now, we have, as a nation, to decide whether this is enough of a high stake or not, and we have to change the way we are doing things.
And Stephen, what are your thoughts on that? How are we doing so far as a country, and what are your kind of imperatives for the future?
So building on what Raj said quite eloquently, and I agree with much of it, it is an imperative to help fix both K-12 and higher education to arrive at better outcomes. It's important for GDP, it's important to have an engaged society, and it is very true, we spend a phenomenal amount of money on education. If we go back in time, way back in time, there's always been personalized learning. It was the apprenticeship model, right? And arguably, that was some of the best education one could receive, and in many of our trades, it's still in play today. I have a neighbor who's a master plumber. He went to school, but then it was the 4-year apprenticeship that set him on his course of being very successful. The truth is, it doesn't scale. And so the opportunity we have right now is not a technology opportunity, and it's not a big data opportunity, and it's not a policy opportunity. It's an interconnected opportunity, right? Because it's not just making it personalized for the student, which we do quite well today, but it's also personalizing it for the instructor. Because as much as there are learning styles, there are teaching styles. And then since education is inherently social, it's about personalizing within learning teams in near real time. And if you unpack all of that, it's really about making every minute count. It's the fact that, and I was talking to a group earlier, if you look at a K-12 classroom, and if it's lucky enough only to have 30 kids in it and 1 teacher, each student gets about 4 minutes a day of attention, 20 minutes a week from that dedicated teacher. If we look at a 300-person intro course in Pick Your Favorite University, the time the student really gets to engage with a faculty member is even less. Agreed? And so what we can do, though, and what we're doing at McGraw-Hill and committed to doing, is taking the power of pedagogy, learning maps, and technology woven together to empower both teacher and student. And that's why I'm excited about this moment in time. So when you think about personalized and adaptive solutions, and if you think about learning maps built on fine granular learning objectives that are not hardwired together, but that are actually responding to behaviors in memory decay, responding to student capabilities, that are crafted by faculty teaching style, what you see is greater outcomes because the time studying and the time in class change dramatically. Time studying becomes much more productive, and yes, doing homework matters to Anant's point, sorry to say. But then time in class can be dynamically creating groups of like students who can be self-supporting and also drive inquiry with teacher as guide. And so it's the power of that holistic model that really, I think, gets me excited about today. But what I can't do is unpack any one piece of that to say what's most important. It is absolutely a solution view of the world that I think propels us forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said. And I think what's interesting is, Dan, you're focusing on even earlier than coming into school. You're focusing on preschool. And so talking about holisticness, you're basically saying, let's start from really early on and apply personalized
Right,
learning
exactly.
there.
So my daughter started kindergarten last year. She is at a private school. They have 15 kids, but even among 15 kids, she was reading, and a lot of her friends are still learning alphabet. And for the teacher, it's hard. So how do you teach a class, even 15 kids, and some are already reading and some are still learning alphabet, right? So the truth is, typically teachers have to pay more attention to those who are lagging. And at that time, those who are already get it or who are ahead, what are they doing? They are waiting. Well, you know, everybody knows that the biggest asset of we have as a human, our asset is time. So how to utilize that time, how to help teachers to differentiate each individual child and give each individual lesson, and at the same time track their progress. That's the puzzle that we at Vinci we try to solve.
Right.
Starting from very early, because the issue is, you know, everybody scream about closing the achievement gap, but when you look at the gap, they don't close at all. They go from, you know, preschool and they just go parallel, right? So instead of closing it, we need to prevent it. And preventing the gap have to start from very early on.
Absolutely.
Yep.
There's been a lot of discussion around closing that feedback cycle of, you know, it's one thing to say we're going to personalize the user experience, which we can do in a lot of software experiences. It's another thing to say we're going to use the data that we collect, feed it back to the educators or the parents at home, and actually evaluate whether it's working or not, right? And think about the closed feedback cycle and iterative loop that we need to actually learn and assess the impact on technology. Do any of you have comments on what you're doing or kind of the strategies for closing that feedback loop?
So on our side, what Vinci has developed is a learning management system. So we do collect the data. I hope that I was on that panel as well, but I was not. So when you collect the data, the issue is how to utilize that data. And especially for younger kids, they don't care about what you're doing, right? But at the same time, we need to know, to help the teachers, we need to know how each individual child is doing. Okay, so little Joe already know how to sort by color, but maybe little Susie already get over to something else. And based on that, the teacher can utilize that data to determine what will be the next step for little Joe or little Susie. And so close that feedback loop. So instead of getting the teachers scrambling with 15 or 20 or 30 kids, we get the IT system to suggest to teachers, hey, little Joe need to be on that lesson, or little Susie should go on to next step of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I think it's the right thing to do, and honestly, it's the only thing to do. I mean, if you think about everything that we take for granted in life, you've all seen junior league soccer being played in our backyards, and actual professional soccer being played. I don't think you expect the coach to go and say, "Hey, here is the playbook. Now all of you go play it. Now we'll become an A-class team," right? It never happens. You want personalized coaching at the soccer field. You go to a music teacher. You don't actually think about, hey, you don't expect the music teacher. It's not a fair answer. Nobody will actually agree on it. To say that, hey, I taught your kid 10 hours, the last 2 months. If he's not playing the piano, tough luck, right? You don't accept that. You want personalized feedback. You want proof that your kid can actually, press the keys and actually make something that sounds like at least like music, right? And that's the whole feedback loop where you expect someone to personalize the feedback, and we want to provide both the systems and tools, the technology for teachers to basically have an idea about what's really happening even when they're teaching 20 kids or heck, 200 kids, and still be able to personalize that feedback on the teacher side and also on the student side, that they actually are getting feedback. If my son or daughter is actually playing soccer in the field and they don't get coaching from the coach, either I'm going to put them on another team or fire the coach. Because I expect them to learn to play soccer the way it's supposed to be played, not something that basically says that I think your son kind of can kick the ball around. It has to be something more meaningful than that. And the whole objective and I completely agree with what Stephen is saying, right? It's not about technology. It's not about just machine. It's not about artificial intelligence that can actually observe every single keystroke and pen stroke and basically come up with some fantastic algorithm that tells you that I suck in math, right? I mean, I don't need that.
Calculus specifically?
Yeah, calculus specifically, especially, right? What we need is an intelligent human being that can actually just go through all of that and come to an assessment very rapidly, and that's where technology will help us. It's a combination of man, machine, human, technology, interface that gives you data about things that matter the most. If we collect data of how I'm waving my hand and am I a better speaker? I don't think so, right? And I think that so we need to think about how we can employ technology to provide the right, if I can say, the signals. And these signals have to be interpreted by a human being in a very timely manner. I mean, I was aghast when New York, this happened a couple of months back, flash in the newspaper a couple of months back. New York City kids cannot, perform really well in Common Core. I think only 30% of the kids actually passed the exam. They took the exam in April. They got the results in August. Something is wrong here, right? And that's what I'm talking about, the ability for the feedback loop to be timely so that when you're making a mistake, that mistake can be that you're providing people the technology and the tools to actually provide that feedback. And in our product as well, we have a booth in the Venetian, booth number 70903. You can come and take a look at the demo. That's what we are focused on.
Right.
So I think another way of looking at it is the language we are using is completely wrong. It's not about the feedback loop, and it's not about closing it. It's about really looking at academic design and creating a learning experience that's living. So as we approach product development in McGraw-Hill, it's really about adaptive solutions. The solutions don't wait for feedback loops. The solutions simply engage with the learner. They're vibrant. They're bidirectional. Yes, we're dashboarding in real time and giving insights to faculty because the teacher is and will always be central. But if we also want to empower the learner, it's about when they go look at the Alex Pie in real time, they know where they need to go next. It's about when they have a reading experience. We break with natural human behavior, which is to spend time on the passages we're most comfortable with, and actually to highlight the ones we don't know yet, and fade to the background the passages we've already mastered. And so in a sense, it is absolutely feedback, but I worry about the word. To me, it feels passive. It feels reactionary. And I think if we're really going to leverage technology for all it can do to help humans, it is about academic design in its core. And it is about marrying academic design to how we teach, to technology, to how we learn. And so we just need to reconceive when we build that course, how is it built to really be vibrant and be more like an organism? And so that the learning is changing the more it's interacted with. And so I think if we could have an action-oriented to just being more of a system that's evolving, an ecosystem, to me that language will propel us faster forward.
Do you have an example, Stephen, of a school system or an anecdote that comes from you guys using
it? So we do, and we see it. So we see it both in K-12, and I think the greatest example is we have a solution called Alex that was built on top of many, many years of research and learning space theory out of UC Irvine. And it really is just this, and we see it used very well both in K-12 and in higher ed. My son uses it. He's 10 years old. He's dyslexic, as I am. And I'll tell you, when he used to come home with the tear-out worksheets, for math, he would crumple them up, he would get really angry, and he'd throw them away. And I'd say, Ben, why are you so upset? He's like, Dad, they asked me how to do this and to write out an equation. I just intuitively know how to do this. Because one of the gifts of dyslexia is a very fast mind at modeling. And he said, Dad, I don't know how I solved this equation, but I just solved it. But I hate homework. So we got him Alex. And what Alex does is it changes up what Ben's exposed to based on how Ben interacts with it. And we have a real problem, because between that and Minecraft, we can't get him off the damn tablet, right? And he uses both equally. If we look at something like SmartBook or LearnSmart in our community colleges, and there are hundreds and hundreds of cases to cite, and we've got billions of data points that show us student achievement improving, what we hear really is these environments took away the complexity of me figuring out what to study when. And what they did is they, truth be told, I may have only spent an hour a week on my freshman course, but that hour, I knew what to study, and so I could focus. But none of that would have worked if both the technology and the curriculum and the micro-learning objectives were designed and tested and curated together. And it still wouldn't have worked if we hadn't partnered with faculty to teach them the best way to use this. And so it comes back to this complete solution. But certainly we see examples from K-12 all the way through adult education where it drives outcomes, and it's pretty cool.
Dan, I see you're nodding your head. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I would, I mean, what Stefan has said is very true, and I would even extend that to everything. Mind, body, and heart, everything are connected together. And I was just, before this panel, I was just having a meeting with a company called NeuroSky. I mean, they also have a booth here. What they do is they monitor the brain activity. And so we know when the child is getting enough of it, so we stop the lesson and then we go do some gym and come back to do it. So, you know, by testing, by putting some sensors, they can measure the heartbeat, they can measure how the brain is concentrated, and you basically have everything, all the picture, and then you can connect all the dots together. It's not just about reading, it's not just about math, it's really to get brain, body, and heart, everything working together.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of, I think what's been interesting from my perspective walking the floor of CES is, you know, wearables and all of these sensors right now are a really hot topic. And I think we're just kind of nascent when it comes to thinking about how we utilize this, the information we're getting from our bodies and ourselves and all these personalized learning experiences. It's really about putting that information together, extracting the meaning that you personally have, not what other people think that you should have, and somehow making conclusions or changing your behavior based on it. I think we still have a long ways to go. If you look at like the Chichka halls of CES, I think we have a long ways to go, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
But I think there's an important consideration in that as well. And I don't think we should hold this show as the high water mark. And the reason I say that, it's great, you know, a lot of young boys pretty happy out there. We run the risk of overshooting and over-complexifying. And we need to be very careful because, you know what, we do have an education crisis, and we do spend a lot of money on it, and we can't have such a high watermark that we make it too complex or too expensive. And so at the core of this, the place we make the greatest impact is to harness this technology in ways that are simply easy to use today. And certainly we should have in our academies researchers pushing for tomorrow. And in our corporate learning organizations, we should always be pushing for tomorrow. But I think it's really important to get to market today pragmatic, workable, personalized, and adaptive solutions, because now's the time, right? And you know, the average K-12 classroom still has a connectivity issue, right? The average community college still has a digital divide. And my worry is if we build for the gadgets we see in some of the corners of today, those gadgets are still out of reach of a large part of the population we need to serve. So yes, we should see what they can do for the future, and I love them for what they are. And a lot of my colleagues at work have Google glasses for sure, and I think they hold promise in the future, and they're cool. but we need to just blend it up with also what we can deliver today, if that makes sense.
And that's a really good point. So on that question, what is your experience of what is working today, Raj?
Well, I mean, I think I completely agree with Stephen, right? I think that there is a point where you can abuse and overuse technology, and and then you have all these fantastically designed gadgets that don't talk to each other. Then you actually, create APIs and fantastic gizmos, and probably employ more software programmers.
Wearing robots everywhere.
Yeah, and I think to Dan's point, I think that there is value and merit in using gadgets that like Google Glass or the heart monitors or the brain monitors. I think in pockets for special needs for certain circumstances, I think they are fantastic, and I think almost needed, desperately needed. For children who are special needs, children who actually have special handicap, whatever. But I think that what's really working today, I think we are seeing that if you look at what's been out there. I have personally seen that. I think early 2000 was, I think, the advent of internet technology, online learning, all of those things. But still, to Dan's point, the gap has not reduced. Performance has gotten poorer, and really measurable impact has not been done because people were looking at this from a technology perspective rather than from a learning perspective. There is two fundamentally different things. It's almost like, when, the oft-repeated cliche statement about, if Ford was not there, somebody would have actually built a better horse-driven carriage, right? I think we have to fundamentally rethink what's important, what's needed, and just throw out everything else that's not working. And I think that, wearables, more personal technologies are obviously, completely destroying barriers and hurdles that have been there. I think we went from desktops, then we went to laptops. I don't think we can argue that laptops didn't have their value in schools or tablets, early tablets. Now we are having these form factors of these cell phones and iPods that can be actually that can be treated as clickers that can actually tell a teacher teaching a class of 30 kids whether 30% of the class got it or 90% of the class did not get it, right? And that's good feedback for a teacher. If I was a teacher, I would like to know that. If I'm just continuously talking and I spent an hour and then 90% of kids did not get it the whole hour, I just wasted a very good hour, right? And so I think what's really working is usable technologies like tablets, usable technologies like iPods. And I think to some extent smartboards because they enable teachers to do things better. What's not working today is teachers have more tools. You have the PowerSchool, you have the grading system, you have the PowerBook, you have the administrative junk. But if you ask them, if I get a stack of paper, and if I have 30 kids in the classroom, and they all do 10 problems, you have to grade 300 problems, exactly what you did in 1700, right? And that has to change. We have to amplify things that are supposed to be having a meaningful impact. We have a crisis actually, to be honest, because UNDP World Population Report states that by 2025, in 12 years, we're going to have 1 billion more people on the planet. And guess what? The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually says that 50% of teachers abandon the profession every 5 years. Now go figure out how to solve this problem, right? And that's the problem to be solved. We are way beyond the tipping point. There are certain things that work. Let's try to see how we can actually use usable technologies like tablets and other things to have meaningful solutions that actually amplifies, makes teachers more efficient. God, they work in investment banking hours and get paid less than a tenth of that, right? And we're expecting more and more and more.
Right.
I think we have to solve some real problems on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And I think building on that, those are excellent points. So it's about reducing the complexity, if I generalize some of what you were saying. And we certainly believe that at McGraw-Hill. So it's about standards. It's about why can't there be universal education identity for the students, right? Why can't that identity be portable? We at McGraw-Hill believe deeply in open systems and open standards because it's an ecosystem that results in learning. And the technology needs to continue to fade into the background, so learning is in the foreground. So what's working is we do have devices that are very natural to learn from. And we do have personalized and adaptive solutions woven together with pedagogy and content that actually eliminate grading because the whole cycle of feedback and learning and probing and analysis and change is one. What isn't working, though, are the amount of barriers for that community college or that K-12 system to bring this all together. And that's simply about standards. And if there's one difference we can all make, it is to drive towards standards. And it's to discourage business models that frankly arbitrage the lack of standards, but in fact to work with the folks that are driving standards. And I think that combined with, and I think you made an excellent point, carving out time to reinvest in our teachers. So they abandon not necessarily just because of pay, they abandon because they have no time to rejuvenate. They have no time to relearn their craft, right? And this world is changing around them, and there's nothing more frustrating than being in a job where your skills are out of date or where your employer doesn't allow you to grow and develop. And so if we invest in our faculty, if we encourage our brightest and best to be teachers, and then we give them a world where it's easy to leverage what we're offering, I think we're in good shape, and I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for early childhood or primary years, the situation is a little bit special because we all know that the young children, they learn through play. And for them, technology is just a way to play. And in our implementation, we see kids, second week after they got our tablet-based program, they all know the days of the week. And the teacher's like, holy cow, how did they all know that days of the week? Because they remember that Tuesday and Thursday are Vinci days. Yeah? We don't need to teach them, they just remember because they love to play. So learning through play, and then technology for them, it's just a way to play. So when we ask them to learn, they don't care. But when we give them something to play, they love it. So leveraging their interest is very critical. We all know that when we are interested, as adults, when we are interested in something, we just spend hours and hours going into it. And it's exactly the same thing for children. So how do you get them to pay attention to what you need them to learn? It's not by pulling them and sitting down and listen, but by doing things. So they play with our game-based lessons, they will progress, they will interact with monkey or whatever, and then at the same time, they learn addition, subtraction, and then build their confidence about math and reading and different things.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think we just have to look at human evolution and biology to just take some examples. I don't think we have big data to teach us how to walk when we were toddlers. We don't need that. Nobody has actually taught us to walk because of big data. If you look at a soccer team, you see, again, a junior league or professional soccer, 20 guys kicking around maybe a white ball, black ball, and then maybe guys' parents really, proud and actually watching these kids and videotaping this, or guys paying thousands of dollars to watch these guys kick around a ball for 90 minutes. Just think about this, right? The whole system crumbles if you take a stupid 2 feet by 5 feet scoreboard away. Now, nobody wants to kick around a ball. Nobody wants to watch them. You've just taken it away, right? Because the incentive is completely gone. I think what we're talking about is human beings by general are, we just like to shoot the breeze, play. We don't like to study. Study is bad. Learning is good. People are, I think kids actually teach us, toddlers teach us. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about, game-based or more nature-based ability to actually see whether it can absorb something. I mean, if kids can actually get their Thursdays and Fridays clear just because they're not even thinking about it, I think that's most important. I think there is an opportunity here, and we are actually, and I completely agree, Stephen, we are in a fantastic moment in time where technology is affordable, cheap, the right technology can be used to actually make kids learn because they're inherently, or students of any age, including me, I learn because I enjoy. You ask me to do something because it's boring, I'm just not going to do it. And I think we need to actually focus on that natural, friction-free processes to actually teach kids, not force them to do things.
Yeah, when we were setting up this panel and we were talking about engagement specifically with you, Dan, we were talking about whether gaming theory and principles have been correctly applied so far and how you're using them. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yes, so from our perspective for children PK to 3, we noticed that when they are playing, they don't care about what they are learning, but they just pick up concepts over the process. And so I think gamification is definitely one of the possibilities for children to concentrate. I have adopted boy who just arrived a few months ago. I couldn't pull him down sitting there even for 5 seconds to start reading a book. But when I put him on our Vinci program, I don't need to say anything. He will just keep going, keep going, keep going. So kids, they have concentration for things they are interested. And so the first thing, how we break that barrier so that they are interested in learning, which is our goal, everybody's goal, that we need kids to learn. And so the first thing is to make the learning fun. Like Stefan was saying, learning itself is an experience. How to make that experience fun and intriguing and for them to be willing to spend time on it. This is something I think we need to solve.
And I think that's true at all ages. We recently introduced a game, and I'll say this name very carefully because if I say it wrong, it's Government in Action is the name of it. Say it quickly for a second.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk there.
Yeah. And it was thoughtfully designed around learning objectives, around behaviors, around wanting to help non-government majors, so freshmen in college, maybe high school, juniors, seniors, who had no interest in government, but who, for whatever reason, needed to learn about how this government in this country works. And it starts with authentically thinking about sort of the goals of the learning experience, and then we worked with some great game designers to make it fun and engaging. And the hardest thing with it is getting the students off of it, right? And to your point, people are naturally competitive, and the scoreboard's up there. But it's not just about the outcome of the game. It's about the embedded learning objectives that are mastered or not mastered along the way so that the teacher has teachable moments to take the learning further, right? So gaming done that way, I think, is very powerful. And I think we're all sort of saying that.
Absolutely.
But don't for a minute think you can just take some sort of retail entertainment game and necessarily turn that into learning. You might, but don't forget at the end of this, we're trying to impart mastery and knowledge. And so we have to understand not just the outcome, but all the intricacies of mastery that can happen throughout the game. And done that way, it's very powerful.
I totally agree. I often tell people, you can't read newspapers and become a PhD.
Yeah.
Right.
Because even you get all the knowledge, everything from the newspapers, you don't follow a certain structure to get there. So everything is about the structure.
Yeah. Well, I just got the time signal from Carrie, so thank you so much for an engaging discussion, and we're going to turn it over to the audience for questions.
Yes, thank you. Okay, any questions? Here we go, right back here. Again, if you'll please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brandon. I work with an education technology company called Coopers in the DC area. This message is actually for Stephen, and I wrote it down. So I've been very impressed with your answers today and your thought process, but my question is regarding the structure of higher education, more in the higher education realm. So the incentives for professors and how it's more of like an enterprise than actually an academic institution. But with the rising skill gap in our country widening, so we have 1.5 million unfilled jobs, skilled jobs. Higher education institutions really aren't providing the type of ROI from a value proposition standpoint. So does there need to be a new type of system, a new type of institution even, to adequately prepare students for jobs for today and to ensure that personalized education becomes more of a reality in the higher education? Thank you.
So I think that's a great question.
Great
And I was a higher ed CIO, and then I was also before that in higher ed creating online learning programs in the early 2000s, and I also had a consulting company that consulted to provosts and presidents. Higher education is not monolithic in the States. It's 4,500 institutions, and there's some very different, as we all know, some of those campuses are very different. They're the campuses where it's working fine, and there's no crisis, and they're all the way down to some campuses where if you add back, the depreciation and unfunded maintenance on their buildings, they're technically bankrupt, and there's consolidation happening down there. So I think what you see in this moment of crisis, and I was talking to some folks earlier, think of this industry, right? So it has you can buy this product, although most people never finish receiving the product because they either graduate late or don't finish, right? It's going up, 2x the rate of inflation. There's only one creditor left to offer debt to help you buy the product, the US government. And it takes, on average, right, the year of 1 year of household income to pay for a year of college, right? This sounds like the housing bubble, right? And so there is a forcing function of change, right? The credit markets and the tuition markets cannot continue at this pace. And that's going to force a function both on new models of education. It's going to force probably some consolidation. It's going to look at ways of maybe stopping the arms race for what's installed in a dorm. Have you been in a dorm lately? Right? Better in my house, right? I'd love to work out at their athletic center. And so there are some grand experiments. There are schools, for example, that are right now offering a less expensive degree with the same faculty if the student agrees not to use the campus center and the gym and the dorm and all this other stuff that adds cost. There are schools, as we heard earlier, that are really looking at a competency-based model to reduce time to degree, which, by the way, reduces cost, right? We're also seeing in our community colleges, obviously increasing demand, but we're also seeing growth in our modern version of our vocational institutions, which I think is right on. Because there's skills gaps in every area. There's skills gaps in the white-collar jobs and in the blue-collar jobs. And so we're actually seeing a more heterogeneous approach to higher education re-evolving. It's moving back to what it might have been, but with a more efficient delivery mechanism. And so to answer your question, in the short realm, I think you're going to see a lot of experiments. I think it's going to be forced by the economics of the situation. I think that's healthy, but we have a lot of really, I think, innovative deans, presidents, and provosts that I speak to who are absolutely not up to the challenge of the experiments. They're driving them. And so I do think we'll see in the next between 3 and 7 years some major reinventions in higher education that are going to be really powerful because the experiments are happening now.
Great. One more question. Here we go.
My name is Dr. Tinker, and I am a pediatrician. And I'm very interested in what you said about early education. There are a number of studies we have at Children's Hospital where the frontal lobe of children, based on using video games or not using motoric experiences, are altered. Meaning, apparently, the executive function and the attention span seem to have been altered by what we're doing electronically. My question for early childhood is, if you consider children that will become professors, doctors, lawyers, number one, what will we do to maintain those executive functions which we need? And number two, I'm kind of interested in the Chinese versus American model, because they tend to drill like we used to. 50 math problems, just rigorous training for the future, versus what has become a problem. A lot of my college students have 8th grade writing skills, and they're going into public health. So I know I asked a very broad question, but I think you understand the issues.
I love your question.
And I would love it to be one-on-one global education, because that's what I do.
Okay. I love your question for both questions. I'm very passionate about. The first one related to executive function. I know that not everybody is a brain scientist, but just let's visualize a block diagram where the overall memory functions are separated into two pieces. The first one is the short-term memory, and second part is the long-term memory. Okay. When you have a lot of technology distraction and TV and all this, most of these content, they act on the short-term memory and they don't go into long-term memory, and it's even, you forget retrieval. Okay, retrieval function, meaning say you remember a concept, one day you need to use this concept, calculus or whatever, take it out and try to use it. These technology pieces are called distraction. My kids don't watch TV because there is overflow of information that children cannot process it. So what they are doing is they just watch it without thinking it, because it doesn't get down to the long-term memory, and it doesn't really help them to retrieve the information and try to process that in the short-term memory or in the executive function area of the brain. So what we really need to develop is technology-based content that not only is engaging, but help them to remember the concept and also retrieve that to utilize that. So the learning through technology cannot just be learning through technology. It has to be real life connected. It has to be, say, for example, we talk about a game in the shopping, in the grocery store. We help the character, which can be a monkey, to go pick up the fruits, and then we come back to put the different fruits into a chart, so they are learning statistics. and then how to reflect that in the real life, and then we get them to go home or in the classroom to play again with different fruits, and then let's see again if they are able to put the chart together. Right? So help them to remember the concept and retrieve the concept to utilize it. This is a distinction what I call between the good technology and the bad technology. So I remember an article I saw. You can just think about the two ways of using technology. One is it's like a water skiing. So you are pulled, right? You are doing water skiing, you are pulled. You really don't have time to process, to look at on the show what you are seeing. And this is the things that you do a lot of video games, you are driven. But the other way of using technology is you drive the technology. You take your time, you go process it, and you understand it before you move to the next step. It's like a scuba diving. So it's a water skiing versus scuba diving. And for children, from education point of view, you really need to look for this scuba diving type of experience. That means let children drive what they need to do with technology, rather than getting technology to drive the kids. Yeah, so that answers your first question. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So the second part, comparing Chinese model and American model, or generally speaking, North American model, because I live in Canada. So I think there is, I've been studying that for quite a bit of time, because I grew up in China and then lived the rest of my life here. I think the major difference is Chinese education take education as an obligation, which is the same way as the North American education. Education is an obligation. We know that we have to go to school. My daughter yesterday was asking me before I come here, oh, I have to go back to school again. It's not fun because I have to sit down and listen. It's not a fun experience because it's a necessity. I think in China, it's the way it's perceived is parents, they are on it. They drill their kids at the same time as teachers. In North America, it's slightly different because average parents don't like to drill their kids, right? So, but at the same time, you look at the different learning styles, you see that in North America, we promote a lot more creativity, reasoning, logics, and all these things, which it doesn't really exist too much in the traditional Chinese education. However, I have to say that certain part of China, like Shanghai, where we do work together with them, they start to realize that. And so for early childhood, in like a kindergarten and preschool, they start to incorporate Montessori and Reggio Emilia approaches and give children opportunities to explore and do inquiry-based learning. So basically give some control to children. So when you give control to children, you'll be totally surprised because they can be very innovative. They will find a way how to figure out. And that's something I believe that doesn't matter, Chinese, American, or whoever, we need to promote this type of inquiry-based learning. Give children, doesn't matter how old they are, give children the possibility to control their own learning experience.
I just want to add to, I think it's a fantastic point I think Dan, you made. There is a big difference between just drill-based experience. I kind of like to twist it a little bit to say practice, plus if someone, if I were to ask you what's 3 times 5, I think everybody in the audience will say 15. But if I were to ask you, is it 3 rows of 5 columns or 5 rows of 3 columns? How many can answer that question correctly? I'm sure that I'll have a big distribution here. And the reason here is that I think there's a big difference between cognitively responding to something because I kind of sort of know it, to really conceptually understanding something, which is very important from a foundation building perspective. I kind of draw a parallel to this kind of learning to learning how to swim and learning how to cycle. There is no in between. I kind of sort of know how to swim, either swim or sink, right? And if we don't teach conceptual understanding at a very foundational level to early elementary kids or elementary education, it's going to actually have disastrous consequences because people don't understand conceptually. Learning math is actually a very visual, conceptual framework in people's minds as they grow older, and there's been studies on studies that actually indicate that students who have very poor visual perceptions of what math is, if they don't understand numeracy, then they won't actually have the ability to perform very well in math. I'm just going to, I know we are running short of time. I just want to actually talk about how babies and toddlers actually think about math. When people were asked the question, what's the difference between 2 minus 1, and the relationship between 2 and 1, and what's the relationship between 9 and 8, adults basically said it's the same thing. 9 minus 8 is 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. Kids, on the other hand, and this is actually a researcher who actually has done babies who actually can tell the difference. Kids actually think not linearly, they actually think exponentially. They think the difference between 2 and 1 is 50% or 100%, depending on 2 is 2 times, 100% more than 1. 9 is just an 8th more or a 9th more than 8. They think very differently. So we have an obligation to teach kids correctly the conceptual learning. Practice, I don't call it drill. I think practice with conceptual learning is very important, but I think we are on the right track.
I would add the word fun. Fun
Absolutely.
practice, right?
Absolutely.
We can achieve that with the games.
Gamified.
Exactly.
Fun, simple, gamified
Absolutely.
practice. Thank you so much to all of our panelists
Thank
today.
you. Thank you, Masuma. Thank you so much.